The Legend of Zelda series means a lot to a lot of people, like us, but in the overall gaming community at large, it is not necessarily a series that is notorious for being scary or disturbing. There have been examples, but at their core, the games are fairly light-hearted adventure games, and especially in more recent years. It's definitely no Silent Hill or Resident Evil, and yet, for some of us, these games provided us with our first encounters of fear and horror at a very young age. And there's a popular incentive to bring these kinds of horror elements back to the series after being mostly absent from Breath of the Wild. But the question is, why? What makes us love these darker themes found in games like Majora's Mask so much? And why are they so effective? Today we will celebrate Halloween by exploring this phenomenon, to see how and why it is crucial to the gameplay, the story, and the overall experience that we have as players. And more importantly, why it will greatly benefit the sequel to Breath of the Wild. But first, before we get into it, as always, make sure to leave a like, and if you're new, subscribe and press that shiny notification bell as more Zelda videos are on the way, even this week.
When talking about the darker side of the Zelda series, two titles seem to pop up the most in people's lists, and who can blame them? We are of course talking about Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask, the former that introduced the darkness, and the latter which would outdo its predecessor roughly a year later. When gamers booted up Ocarina of Time for the first time in the late 90s, they were met with a magical world of fairies, a talking tree, fireflies, green fields, and kids dressed like something straight out of a Disney movie. What they probably weren't expecting, however, was that the game would gradually shift from something like this to this. It's a massive contrast to the beginning of the game, and Ocarina of Time ramped up its darker themes slowly as the story progressed. Encountering the first redents in the royal family's tomb was quite the shocker for some of us, but we hadn't seen anything yet. Some might write this off as just childhood nostalgia, but we beg to differ. Horror movies, roller coasters, haunted house rides, there is a plethora of entertainment out there to provide us with a sense of fear, even as adults. Video games are no different, and while some media is specifically made with the purpose to scare you, others incorporate scary themes only partly. They're not just about horror, in fact the main focus of their story is usually on something very different. The creepy parts are already there to serve as an obstacle the protagonist must overcome to reach their ultimate goal, testing their courage and determination to venture forth. Even fantasy stories benefit greatly from having dark and unsettling moments. Think of Harry Potter, Lord of the Rings, or even animated cartoons. It makes us respect the protagonist, for we feel their fear and struggles. We let out a sigh of relief alongside them as the obstacle is finally overcome. And in video games, these emotions are amplified even more, since not only are we experiencing the adventure with the character, we are directly responsible for their success or failure. We have to keep our focus. The game is actually testing our courage as well. Be it kid or adult, we are the hero.
The origins of a lot of Japanese horror can be traced back as far as the known history of Japanese literature, mainly classic folklore and fairy tales from the Edo and Meiji periods, also known as kaidan, with kai meaning weird, strange, or mysterious, and dan meaning to discuss or talk, roughly translating to a discussion or passing down of the tales of weird, strange, or mysterious. Certain elements of these stories have later been incorporated into modern films, books, and yes, even video games. It's hard to imagine a game like Majora's Mask being made by anyone else than Nintendo. Though generally regarded as more kid-friendly, they also have come up with some of the more weird, scary, and mysterious concepts seen in gaming. We see the same trend across other Japanese media as well, like movies and anime and even manga. Japanese horror is famous for their unique treatment of the genre in comparison to the Western world, using the idea of what you don't see or know to unsettle the viewer. Now, this isn't to say that anything that the Japanese developers create is not in some way derivative or borrowed from other cultures. On the contrary, they have in fact taken a lot of inspiration from many, including the West, from the works of H.P. Lovecraft to Chinese folklore to Egyptian culture, but it's the way that they handle the genre that makes it so unique. Nintendo is no different. Throughout their games, a multitude of influences from different folklore, legends, and even historical events can be found. There's the story of Hanako-san, the spirit of a girl whose ghostly hand can pull people down into the toilet. Sounds familiar. And then we have the Po-spirit, which is a rendition of the most common version of the Japanese ghost, an entity manifested by rage or hatred. We see the concept of using sounds or music to appeal spirits or drive them away. The Gyptos and Anubis enemies are obviously taken from Egyptian culture. And of course we have the Romani Ranch side quest, being a direct nod to classic American myths involving cows or other livestock being abducted by aliens. Even the scrapped enemy designs for Breath of the Wild seem to have an almost Lovecraftian feel to them, due to their colossal size and almost alien features. There's a good reason why PT, which wasn't even close to being a full game yet, was celebrated by the gaming community. It marked the return of the Japanese influence to Silent Hill, a series that, in the eyes of its fanbase, lost a lot of its quality due to the lack of such influence, after being outsourced to Western developers. Their creativity, culture, and mindset gives them a lot to work with, and this includes Nintendo. They managed to give us the chills, and in a lot of cases, we don't even see them coming.
When a viewer or player knows upfront that the media they are interacting with is going to scare them, it actually creates a disadvantage for said media before you even hit the play button, or touch a single button on your controller for that matter. Because you already know what the goal is going to be, it's going to scare you, or at least make an attempt at doing so. That is not to say some of these types of media won't still succeed in getting a scare out of you, but in our experience the most impactful scares are the ones we experienced when we were drenched in ignorant bliss. Remember that man-eating piano in Mario 64's Haunted Mansion level? Yeah, that probably scared some kids back in the day. E for everyone, I'm right. The Legend of Zelda series is no different. The games are marketed as action-adventure games or fantasy games, and up until Twilight Princess even went as far as to be rated E for everyone. Go figure. Which makes me think that that person who rated Ocarina of Time probably didn't play past Kokiri Forest, or at least not to the Shadow Temple. This could be one of the reasons why a lot of the darker themes made such a big impact on us when we first played it. Fear works best when it is unexpected and given in small doses. A constant bombardment of fear-inducing moments will quickly desensitize a player, and Zelda gives it out sparingly. The games trigger a lot of other emotions as well: joy, frustration, a sense of wonder and discovery, and also curiosity. These emotions linger long after you complete the game, and a lot of fans of the series have carried them along with them even into adulthood.
Fear is often associated with negativity, but besides being a mechanism to avoid or escape real-life dangers, it also has many other effects on us, both physically and mentally. In video games, it can create a sense of fulfillment and pride when we manage to overcome the horrors that lie before us. It gives us anticipation and a nervous joy for what lies around the corner. But besides our own human experience, it also impacts the game itself greatly. Especially its story. Imagine Ocarina of Time or Majora's Mask, but stripped from all of its dark themes. It would no doubt drastically change the games, and not for the better. Their stories would be much less impactful, the hero's journey no longer as impressive as it once was. A lot of the appeal of Majora's Mask comes from the way the game uses its dark tone to tell its story, while still remaining a magical experience at the same time. And it came with the scary images that have left a mark on us ever since. The graveyard, Ikana Castle, the ghostly invasion of Romani Ranch, they all serve to give weight to the journey Link has to take before finally facing off against Majora. There is actually a big difference between being anxious to get a game over by a powerful enemy and actually being shaken by the imagery and emotion behind a situation or location. The best type of horror is the one that grows even more frightening the more you think about it. Why are there undead corpses in the royal family's crypts? What is the Shadow Temple? What happened to Romani after she was abducted? It makes your imagination run wild. Encountering a Guardian Stalker or a Lionel for the first time can be unnerving, yes, but other than being afraid to get your Hylian butt kicked and having to restart the game, there is no further depth to it than that. Most games have various degrees of punishment for losing, so as the player, we have been conditioned to avoid such an outcome. It's almost a Nintendo tradition at this point that they never give us the full story behind a situation, leaving the rest up to our imaginations. There is a reason why the internet is filled with theories, analysis, even creepypastas about certain themes found in the Zelda series. We love it because we know so little about it, and the more we speculate, the more frightening it becomes.
This finally brings us to Breath of the Wild, and of course its upcoming sequel, Breath of the Wild 2. When we and many others make lists about the things we want to see return to the series in the future, the aspect of terrifying enemies, dark caves and sinister dungeons, or overall darker themes, almost always makes the list, and always echoes throughout the comments time and time again. And with good reason. Breath of the Wild is a great game, and it brought back other elements which the series had lost since the early games, like the freedom of exploration and non-linearity, and even brought in brand new features that were never before seen in a Zelda game. Unfortunately, it also took some good things away. There was definitely a feeling that some things were missing. Mind you, we're not suggesting that Zelda should turn into a dark and gothic dungeon crawler like Dark Souls, absolutely not, but rather strike a similar balance between horror and fantasy like Majora's Mask did. The sequel to Breath of the Wild will have a chance to rectify this mistake. Bringing back darker elements is key, because as we have explored in this video, it gives more weight and meaning to the journey of our heroes, as well as a bigger sense of fulfillment on the side of the player. Judging by the E3 trailer, we might get just that with Breath of the Wild 2, and we could not be more happy about it, especially when Eiji Aonuma stated that Breath of the Wild 2 might be even a little bit more darker than Majora's Mask. It will greatly benefit the story, as now that Ganondorf is back, the stakes are higher than ever before. This will no longer be about regaining lost memories or growing stronger. Instead, this will be about confronting the true source of Hyrule's peril and preventing history from repeating itself time and time again. And hopefully an army of dark enemies and scary locations that will come on top of it. Anyways, we will talk more about this in the Sunday video, because we have planned even more and also more of an explanation of what the premise, the greater premise, and the showdown of Breath of the Wild 2 could be about. Anyway, thanks you so much for watching this Halloween special, or series analysis if you prefer. We wanted to go deep and look at the more dreadful and terrifying elements that the series has been able to provide throughout its soon-to-be 20th game. And we hope you enjoyed it as much as we did making it. As always, don't forget to leave a like to appreciate the work we put into it, and as I've already mentioned, we have more Zelda videos coming even this week on Sunday and more after that as well, so it would be a good idea to press that subscribe button and also hit that shiny notification bell to not miss any upcoming videos. Finally, we need to thank all our patrons on patreon.com/commonrealm, where we also need your support and it's highly appreciated. Anyway, here is a list of all of them and also a few other videos you should go and check out.